Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. Welcome to day 2 of Radio Week. This session is entitled Protecting Your Digital Operations. We've got an incredible panel ready to speak about all things cyber protection and threat detection, data security. So to kick it off, I'm going to ask each of our panelists just to speak for 60 seconds to tell a little bit about what you do, what your organization is, and then we'll come back here for a great discussion. Brian, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Steve. My name is Brian Powers, VP of Information Security with Cumulus Media. We actually have radio stations over the U.S., about 400 of those across 85 markets. My main job, of course, is to protect the infrastructure, the network, the data along all the markets as well as corporate. And I'm looking forward to the chat discussion this morning.
Great. Philippe, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Philippe Generali. I'm the president of RCS. I'm based in New York, and we have about 15,000 radio stations around the world using our software. We're mostly doing automation with Zeta. We're doing G-Selector, the number one music scaling system that is being used around our customers. We have traffic with Aquara. We do streaming with Revma and a variety of other services. Of course, we're very active in the cloud, and we have some security services that hopefully we're going to say a thing or two about today. We sell our product at the last count in 120 countries, and we have about 18 offices around the world.
Wonderful. Thank you, Philippe. Emilian, would you introduce yourself?
Hey, great to be with you. Thanks for having me. My name is Emilian Papadopoulos. I'm here with kind of two relevant capacities. I'm the president of Good Harbor, which is a cyber risk advisory firm. We're based on Washington, D.C., and I lead the business with Richard Clark, the former White House advisor on cybersecurity. And we help companies of all sectors and all sizes to figure out what their cyber and digital risks are, and then plans to mitigate them. And then in case the threat actors win, the bad thing happens, we also help companies prepare in advance for crisis management through tabletops and other things like that. So we get to work with all sectors, including media. And then additionally, I'm the executive director of Media ISAO. ISAO stands for Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. And so Media ISAO is a member-driven community with about 70 participating media organizations that share information, share best practices to try to keep their technology, their people, their systems and business operations resilient, mostly in the face of digital threats.
Great, thank you. And full disclosure, Brian and I are both members of the ISAO, and frankly, that's how Brian and I met over that ISAO. We'll be talking a lot about that this hour. It's a great organization. So finally, I'm Steve Schultes. I'm Chief Technology Officer for New York Public Radio. We have a much smaller footprint than Cumulus, where we have 8 stations all in one market, the New York City market. But we are number 1 in the mornings right now. So small but powerful, I guess. We're an avid podcaster. We deliver about 1 petabyte of data per month of audio content to users around the world. And of course, all that data has to be secured, protected, and we're going to get into that a bit. So Philippe, I'd like to ask you to start it off. As you said, wow, 15,000 stations around the world. You must have some war stories about data security and with your interaction with all these stations. Can you enlighten us with anything?
Well, boy, where do I start? Yes, there are some calls that are sometimes scary. We have a call center in the U.S. We have call centers in the countries where we operate in the local language, but in the U.S. we have a call center for all the U.S. calls. And I remember that particular one because it was a time pressure there. So the head of the call center calls me and he says, it was an interesting thing because he never calls me, but he said, you might want to jump in for this call. because it's looks like it's a nasty one. One of our customer who operates in several cities across the U.S. has one of his DJ calling him and saying, "Look, I'm on the air, and I have 3 songs queued, but all the songs on my log have disappeared. There's a title and artist, but the automation system says file not found, file not found, file not found." And as we speak, the DJ is there, his head of engineering is there, and they're seeing the file disappearing in front of their very eyes. And it's going at about a file a second. So it's pretty bad because there's something going on there and there's time pressure. So we all jump right away, say, go grab the backup on air, whatever you have for a system. You're going to play music for now. And then rush to your Cisco switch, unplug everything, take all the wires down because that particular organization operates in dozens of cities. And the entire network is linked with the WAN, very high-speed wide area network, which means that essentially the virus can get on very quickly throughout the network. So it was important at that time, and it was a bit like Mission Impossible. The guy said, "Okay, let me rush that." So he starts the backup on-air system, which is a completely at the transmitter system, which only plays music adapted to the format of the station that was hit. And he goes to the Cisco, it comes back and say, my router is completely unplugged. He said, "Okay, let's turn off the machines that you have so that you don't have any problem that propagates further." And then when we look at the directory of the machine, sure enough, the media file, so all those audio files had been wrapped up we turn out to be a ransomware called the crypto locker. So the crypto locker will take your audio files and will put a wrapper around them. It doesn't destroy them, but it disguises them with an encrypted wraparound, digital wraparound. And in the directory of the file, it leaves a little file that says something like README or instruction to decrypt or something like that. It's a text file. It's in the directory. It's like a signature of that malware. So you open that file, and if you are still on a network, or if you have wireless internet access, or if you have a way to get to a website, it will take you to a website that tells you, "Hey, you've just been infected by crypto locker. So here's an address for some Bitcoin, and we'd like $50,000 in Bitcoin. By the way, that amount will increase every 2 hours. So if you don't pay within 2 hours, it's going to be $100,000 after 4 hours, and so forth and so on." So it's a long story. Turned out to be a multi-day story. It was really a horror story, but I can tell you that the CEO decided not to pay, and the engineer had to go through every one of his machines to basically run the antivirus, and when needed, reinstall the software if it was really too bad. And he actually hired us. He said, "Look, I don't have the manpower to do that. And we have about 30 people picking up calls between the people that go on the road to install things like the Z automation system and people that are sitting at the call center." And I said the call center, it's not anymore a call center than what we're doing today. I mean, those people are all over the country, right? They're picking up calls on an IP phone. But we basically had 15 of our engineers on a special mission for the weekend. There was a little bonus package for those guys, and they worked about 12 hours each to help recover the machines, run the antivirus, reinstall the software if need be, restore the backups, and it was at the end, in retrospect, there was a questioning whether he should have paid or he should have convinced his CEO to pay, and it's never a good idea, but it's much faster to send $50,000 than to spend 3 days and 3 nights where the head of the operation, and Brian, you'll appreciate that. I mean, sleeping 4 hours and having the pressure of everybody calling you, and you want to know where it is, and on you go. You're only 1/3 of the way. Go to sleep for 4 hours, midnight, wake up at 4 a.m. and go again, and so forth. That was really a nightmare story. So how can we prevent that from happening? That's the question du jour, Steve, right?
Sure, you bet. Wow, there's so much to unpack in that. And forgive me, before we dive in a little bit, I want to just invite the audience. If you have questions or comments or whatever, put them in the comment section or the chat section. This is designed to be, we're not going to stop for a Q&A at the end or anything. This is just going to be an open flow discussion. And we'd love to hear and see your comments come in that we can react to. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Everything from, the whole ethics of, do you support the threat actors by paying them? And when do you get the law enforcement and the federal enforcement involved and things like that? Brian, do you have anything to suggest about any of that part, or there's there's the data backup to be spoken about?
Yeah, I mean, I knock on wood, have not had to actually involve the authorities or anything on any incidents. But to that point, it's about doing the best practice, validating your backups are happening, test your backups, run those tabletop exercises to make sure things are working, know where your data sits, know the kind of like a business impact analysis of BIA on those systems that are critical to function every day. But it's all about documenting those flows, making sure you're bringing in people. I was on a webinar that used a good analogy of weightlifting. You don't go in and throw all the weight on it and bench press it. You start small and you build upon that. So that's when you start to bring in everybody from the other departments to grow it, to connect on those small scales. But it's not, you can't set it and forget it. It's a constant thing that you have to keep eyes on and constantly monitor traffic, know how your business operates.
Sure. And also I think there's a bit of a change in philosophy that says now that, look, you do everything you can to prevent a hack, to prevent ransomware. You do your employee training. We'll talk a little bit about that too. But I think there's a changing philosophy that says, look, you're going to get hacked at some point. So drill and do more drills of your disaster recovery, your business continuity plan, so that when you do get hacked, the recovery is as quickly as possible with the least damage to the organization, both to the brand and to loss of data and for a radio station, loss of air, right? Emilian, I'd like to ask you something. There was the Media ISAO that you mentioned, the Information Sharing and Assessment Organization. I've learned so much from that. Well, if you could just describe it first, and I'm going to just give a use case to show how my station has benefited from it. How many people are involved in it right now?
Yes, we have about, like I mentioned, 70 participating organizations, and from those organizations, a couple of hundred people. And those people some of them are chief information security officers, chief information officers. Some of them are InfoSec analysts or threat analysts. Some of them are software engineers. Some of them are in legal. Other parts of the business resilience, like Brian mentioned, because you have to have the whole team working to solve the problem. So we purposely took the approach of, it's not just information security people. We want to broaden it out beyond that. So a couple hundred people all in collaborating.
Right. It's a wonderful group. And so I'm one station, right? And I've got a small IT team. I don't have a CISO. I have an assistant director in charge of data security, and we do the best we can with a small amount of people. but I really value the information that we get from the ISAO. It is a Slack channel, and we dive into it every day to see there's best practices and things like that. And I remember I was very surprised back in October, late October, and we saw this on in the media and in the news as well. But there were a number of big organizations, news organizations that suffered a DDoS attack. And it's like, we've all been focused on ransomware and phishing and things. And all of a sudden, like, what are we in the 2010s? Here's a DDoS attack, but it's taking down like 4 of the biggest players. And so we got a little bit of information from the Media ISAO that was posted from the affected organizations. I took that back to our data team, and we did a little bit of research, and we found out the probable cause, the probable vulnerability that opened up for these DDoS attacks. And actually, the research that we found, it was published online, was a vulnerability in HTTP2 protocol. And I sent that back to the ISAO, and people reacted to that, said, yeah, this is probably it. And we took that information back to our own digital operations, looking at our public websites, and we have a bunch of them. And sure enough, one of them, had that vulnerability. So we turned that into a change request immediately, and we changed the protocol within 24 hours. So it's that type of sharing and learning from our own peers, which has been really incredible for us, and it's benefited us because we don't have a person like Brian, leading the ship. I'm a chief technology officer. I know the tech part of it, but there's so much threat out there that I feel that we really need that an organization like that. I'm not sure if that's around the world, if there are other organizations like that, but if there's something available to you wherever you're based, I strongly encourage that you join it and participate in it. Hey, we have a question here that came in. I'm going to read it. It's kind of long. Let's in the realm of data security, how does the integration of cutting-edge encryption technologies align with the evolving landscape of cyber threats? And what steps should be taken to stay ahead of potential vulnerabilities? Anybody feel to speak about that?
I mean, I'll say a few things. I mean, as far as the steps taken to potential vulnerabilities, I mean, if you really start to look at the incidents that happen, the data breaches, they all evolve around the best practice and things that should be doing on a daily basis. The vulnerabilities, keeping systems up to date, patched, having the proper alerting systems to monitor these alerts. As far as the encryption stuff, it's about knowing what data needs to be encrypted, as far as, in transit, where it's going, the man in the middle, because, if you think about it, you could have encrypted data that also gets encrypted by ransomware. It's just you've basically, keep it from being decrypted. But it's the best practice. It's the everyday. It's making sure you know where your data, where it's going, what vendors have access to it. As you've seen in other breaches, it's not just within your environment. You're now kind of extending out and being responsible for your vendors you bring in. So I think just by having the basics of understanding where your data lives, what the data is, and then defining those policies, because not everybody can afford to encrypt everything, because then you have people complaining about the slowness of transfers or getting access to it. So that's just my take. I mean, it's just, I think people have to be more hands-on and involved in where the data flows and how it's actually being used and who uses it in order to protect that data. And goes back, Steve, what you said, it's incident response. What's your downtime ability and how you can recover from that?
Right. And and you put your finger on it too. I mean, we're a big Pro Tools shop. Like I mentioned, we do a lot of podcasting, and a lot of that is really thick production, typical NPR model, mixing and real thick soundscapes, and encryption on Macs really interferes with that product, with Avid's Pro Tools. But we have to understand, well, there's no sensitive data on those machines. It's all going to be stored in the SAN. We can encrypt it there or whatever. But actually on the workstations, it really creates poor performance. So we had to make a decision. And you're right, Brian. It's about where, knowing your data, what's sensitive and what's not, and how much does it affect the actual operation.
There's also one thing about our job. The radio world is different from the rest of the world because we are a real-time organization. So you need to play those files in real time. When you have a DJ is doing a morning show and he wants to press the hotkey, it has to be applause. He's not going to wait for the system to decrypt it, and even half a second of delay is absolutely unacceptable. So you have that real-time aspect, which has been mentioned by Brian is and you, Steve, causes delays that you can't afford to have. So unfortunately, the best protection, we said it's at the point of entry. You got to prevent the threat from entering. That's the number one thing. It's usually a download. If it's a virus, it's usually a download. It's hey, you got your Amazon package has been delivered. Your bank is asking you for verification of this or that, or whatever it is that the point of entry is, and you train the people to not let the threat enter your organization. And if that falls down, the antivirus is your best protection. You gotta, as Brian said, you gotta keep it up to date. You gotta have your overnight antivirus updated properly so that this is not something to be taken lightly. You retire the old computers that are not anymore secure. We have a little private joke on that. We were talking in the green room before. But anyway, you take care of all those things internally. So once the threat is in there, you have something else that's going on.
Right. It's a multi-layer approach, right? You have intrusion protection and detection. You've got malware detection. You've got anti-impersonation detection. But a lot of this, you're right. It also starts with employee training, and we can talk about that a bit because we took that on. I guess I would say fairly recently. I guess just before COVID. But did we really put together a formal training program, and we use a product, and it basically tracks everybody's progress. It's mandated in the company. We chose it was hard choosing a product actually, because you could go from very dry and boring and long, and that's just going to kill it. No one's going to want to do it. We found something very short. It was very humorous and effective. And we do that quarterly, and then we these little training segments, and it's like I say, it's tracked and things, and then we do testing, periodic testing, surprise testing. Our president, CEO doesn't even know when the testing is going to happen. We put that out there.
In fact, Philippe, the email comes from him.
Right, sure.
The debate comes from him.
Yeah. We can craft our own, phishing campaigns, and that has worked very effectively for us. Emilian, with your involvement in your other hat as in a risk assessment, do you focus on, with organizations, media organizations, particular structure of risk, vulnerability, and assessment?
Yeah. So first of all, I think I'll just emphasize what Brian said at the beginning, which is you got to know what you've got from an infrastructure perspective. Last week, we saw Microsoft disclose that the emails of some of its most senior executives of its security team were hacked by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. How did this happen? It's not because Microsoft doesn't have good security, good encryption, and so on. It's because so big, so complex that they had left, an account on a device that was too old and legacy and not attended to, and they forgot to put multi-factor authentication on it, which is like the most basic, thing you can do. And that's all that a really sophisticated adversary needs to get in. So to Brian's, you can have a great big security team. Microsoft has a $3 trillion market cap. I know they have a good security team, but if you don't have a kind of unified approach to seeing all of your infrastructure, seeing all of your data, then being able to decide what's important and how to manage it, you're going to leave a door open somewhere that the bad guy will get in. So I think Brian's point was very well taken. The second thing I'll just say, and you asked specifically about media, is each company's got to figure out, based on its technology, based on its business operations, which things are most important to it, and then set about protecting them. As Philippe said, in radio, it's uptime. You've got to be there. The technology's got to be there when the DJ needs you. Broadcast, we see a lot of operational technology that if that stuff gets wiped out or encrypted, you're going to have a much harder time recovering than if a Windows laptop gets wiped out or encrypted and you can go down to Best Buy and buy another one. So what kind of equipment do you have? Where is the majority of your revenue coming from? What do your external stakeholders depend on you for? These are the questions that I think come at the beginning of any strategy. From there, you know what's most important to protect, and you go pick the right technology.
Yep. Very good. Very good. We got a question in, and it's directed to Brian, but I'm happy to answer it too. It says, Brian, can you estimate how many times a week Cumulus is attacked?
I mean, I guess this is kind of broad because we just got done dealing with this. And when we say attacked, it's not just within our network, it's the social media platforms, it's, the impersonation of our company, the brand, the financial impact that we deal with. But I mean, it's a, of course, every hour, every minute type of scenario that comes on because you have websites, you have, servers or whatever sitting on the edge. And then, like I said, you have the social media. I don't have a number, but I mean, if I had to throw it out there, I mean, I'm sure it's in the hundreds of constantly being, not in a week, but just throughout the day, that is constantly coming at you. And that's why, I'll reiterate that you have to know how your business operates and where data is and the people that are involved. It's the communication is key. But like I said, the attack vector, it's across the board. There's all these little holes that people are constantly looking to get in the door with.
Yeah, great point. We have a managed service security provider, and every week we get that funny graph. It starts with a big funnel at the top, and then it gets smaller and smaller at the bottom to see, and then so it's basically all the attacks, and it's typically in the millions, right? It's just every little thing that the eye sensors, the intrusion protection, anything that gets triggered from endpoint detection to whatever, and then that's just kind of taken for granted. Then you look at the bottom, you see what are the actionable items that we have to address. And thankfully that's like either 0 or 1 or 2 or something like that. But it is of course constant. And you're right, Brian, there's so many vectors now. We've got, everybody's got social media out there and things like that. And, how secure is that, or who's phishing that, or who's impersonating that? So it's a wide net.
It's a sport for a 19-year-old who's computer savvy. They get bragging right when they breach inside an organization. They get bragging right from their peers, and he said, "Look, I got in," and they brag to each other. It's really a sport, so we have to know that and live with it.
Right. Philippe, I think you mentioned before, and I have to say, I'm a customer of RCS myself. So I have a vested interest in your security. And so, as a vendor, and you're a huge vendor for the market, can you talk a little bit about what you do to, you're like the beginning of the supply chain for a radio station, right? So, we have, as New York Public Radio, we have our own security controls in place and things like that, of course. But we have to depend on the code that we're getting in is secure and everything. Can you talk a little bit about, how you as a manufacturer deal with security with either your product or your employees?
Right. So we have training for all our people. It's throughout the organization, not only the coders, of course, but anybody. It starts at the bottom, starting with the temp. When you hire a temp, you got to give him access to the network. And those poor temps, they go through first thing we do is to train them on what's phishing, what's malware, and then we send them tests once or twice a day with bait email to see if they take it or not, and we go back at it and so forth. As you go up in the technology savvy employees, it's less risky because they know what they're doing. But essentially, we protect the point of entry by training our people. That's what we've said. We of course have all our antivirus up to date. That goes without saying. Our code is Java free. We have, when Java was a thing, to a point of vulnerability, we got rid of any Java line of code in our entire libraries. That was a big job. That was months of work to track that down and to make sure it was gone. So we do all this, and we of course use the cloud as a backup, as a security for everything we do and for our customers. I mean, we do it for ourselves. We back up in the cloud. We have Linux environment up there. We have filtering of the data that comes in to be backed up so that we know that the integrity of whatever goes up in the cloud to be available for us in case of a disaster is there. And we do the same for our customers. So you can have in a cloud backup your automation system, your Zeta Cloud automation system, ready to go at a moment's notice with your actual songs, your actual commercials, your actual voice tracks, to the point that when you go in a degraded mode, because, well, I mean, everything you've done has failed. One employee clicked on the wrong thing, your antivirus was not updated for a week, and it got through, and you got attacked. So now you have to go to that degraded mode where something has to play on the air. You might as well play something with commercials so you don't lose money. You have your voice track, and instead of having your head of sales, it's like, how come it's been 2 hours? I haven't played a commercial. You know how much this is going to cost us? How many phone calls have to play to our customers? Everything is playing there because it's in the cloud, and in the cloud, as we know, it's a Linux OS, which means that we have less vulnerability than with Windows.
So yeah, I wanted to flesh that out a little bit. So you have multiple OSs then in your product, is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. We have native cloud product that work in Linux, and we have, of course, the Windows OS, depending on whether we do on-prem or we do cloud operation for the customer.
Right. And touching on disaster recovery or business continuity a little bit, whether the cloud, we use the cloud for DR, but we also have I guess you'd call it a private cloud. It's something that we built out actually in Philadelphia. So it's at least 90 miles away, which I always learned was kind of the best practice to put your business continuity outside of your geographical area. It's on a whole nother electrical grid rather than the Northeast. So that's where we have, actually have a Zeta farm running itself. Brian, can you talk a little bit about your architecture? How do you approach disaster recovery? I mean, you've got hundreds of stations. So do you have it, centrally located or cloud distributed?
Yeah, so we of course the east and the west. So we have our data on both sides of the states. Kind of to your point of having it separated out from one. Definitely try. I mean, it goes to the 3-2-1 solution. We do have the tape for recovery. We do perform restores on those items to make sure that they are successful when they are backed up and able to be used. Let's see, what else about that? But I mean, that's ultimately it. I mean, we do separate out the data, and then also have that data restore process in the incident response piece of it. So if that particular part of the business is impacted, we have everything documented and kind of walk through that scenario to get back up and running. So.
Right. Yeah, for us running out of our cloud, our private cloud facility, it's also a distribution point for all the transmitter sites, by the way. So that we can operate fully from there if we had to evacuate our main studios, or if our data center goes down in our main studios or things like that. Of course, we talked about encryption too. All that data has to get around that point. So, and I guess, part of the disaster and business continuity planning is to decide how much do you depend on the internet as opposed to like expensive leased circuits to get things around the country, around the plant. So we've got a little bit of both: Ethernet private lines, these kind of trunks to connect the transmitter sites and business continuity sites, and then there's basically direct internet access or ISPs that form kind of an SD-WAN approach, so that there's some smart failover from one infrastructure to the other. But Emilian, can you speak a little bit about what you've seen from other media organizations when it comes to basically either best practices of protecting their data, or how they're going about?
Yeah, and if it's all right, Steve, I might actually start answering that by coming back to what you and Philippe were talking about in terms of kind of the supply chain.
Yeah.
So, because I think the supply chain is critical, and it's a really, really hard problem for especially small organizations to solve. But you can do all this great work protecting your own organization, and then your business can be hobbled by a problem in the supply chain. And it's a really hard problem. We've got a lot of suppliers. A couple of points on how we see companies and industries approaching that. The first thing is, and it'll sound like what Brian said before, but you got to know your business. You got to know which suppliers you depend on for what stuff is time sensitive, which of your suppliers have critical data of yours, and so on. Because then you know where to focus your attention. Then you start getting into trying to understand their security and the suppliers view you as a customer, and they want to tell you about their security. But what we see is that a lot of customers, let's say the media organizations, they're spending a lot of time asking the same questions as each other of a single vendor, maybe, who supports the whole industry. And that vendor is spending a lot of time answering questions to the same questions to different customers over and over and over again. A lot of wasted time and energy. It could be going towards security instead of just going towards everybody asking and answering the same questions. So we've increasingly seen these information sharing analysis centers in different sectors pooling together a standard questionnaire and kind of bringing that whole process together. Let's all agree that RCS Worldwide and other suppliers are going to answer these 80% of questions that New York Public Radio has and Cumulus has and everybody else has. Let's answer those questions once, not 100 times. And then if Cumulus has 20 additional questions and New York Public Radio has 20 additional questions, then they can go ask them. Everybody has just saved time. Everybody has just saved money. Now we're going to go spend that time and money on better security. In financial services, they did this. It's called shared assessments. We are seeing other industries like aviation move towards it. And I think that's very promising. And even just a couple of companies can get together and do this. So really consolidating all that wasted energy, I think, is very promising. The other thing I'll say that we've seen is customers and suppliers getting together in crisis management drills, in crisis management tabletops. So a media organization might, let's say a broadcast organization might run its own tabletop and invite one of its top suppliers to participate, to be part of the scenario, see how that would go, how would they work together in a crisis that is affecting them both. That's
a fascinating idea. Yeah.
It is, and it works really well. And the one central ingredient you need for that, or all this other collaboration I'm talking about, is trust between the organizations. People need to spend time together. They need to know that they're on the same page, fighting against the foreign government adversaries, against the cyber criminals, and against the hackers going for bragging rights, like Philippe mentioned. Those are the adversaries. We're all on the same team together, and we need to trust each other and work together to try to solve these problems.
That's a fascinating thing. That's a point I'm going to take home. That's great, because we've done tabletops, but it's always internal, you know. Philippe, have you heard that concept before? Have you ever participated in, or any of your team participated in a client's tabletop? Oh, you're muted, Philippe.
I had to be one somewhere. There's that in our thing. Okay, that was me. No, we've never done it. We've heard about it. So I have no experience with that. But the concept is certainly interesting. Emilian, I'd be thrilled to chat more about that. To know how we could make that a reality for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great concept. Yeah, because like I said, we've done tabletops. Are always internal. You involve the public relations people, the legal, the council, your IT department, engineers, of course, and everything. But that takes it another level, I think, and it involves a major vendor. Yeah, fascinating. The concept of and tabletops in general. I know there's many different kind of scenarios to play out. I actually participated in one with Emilian at a face-to-face meeting of the Media ISAO. And, there's nothing quite like it, especially when you have a great leader to kind of lead you through a very realistic scenario that it's kind of developing, in fiction, of course, but it could be true. And that was, these are great experiences, and it really kind of makes you think. Also, Emilian, that the idea of that vendor questionnaire, that list. I got to ask you how I get a hold of that because we waste a lot of time on that too. It's like, all right, what are the main questions and things like that, and you Google a list, and you find something. That's honestly been a stumbling block for us. So that would be a great path forward. Brian, do you like when you on board, or when you're looking for a new vendor or something like that, do you go through a series of questions, or how do you interrogate them or get to a comfort level with a particular vendor?
So to be honest, of course, a lot of the departments were handling a lot of the vendors that they brought on. We did just recently sign a contract with a TPRM, a third-party risk management vendor. And to the point that he was making about kind of the same document, a lot of the vendors, it's not just the one, but a lot of them actually will, because they've gone through the process with some of these, let's say Microsoft or even the smaller ones, and they have they'll refer to it differently, a trusted connection or something along those lines. So if you are a vendor of them, you immediately have that documentation, whether or not it's audit reports, pen tests, or questionnaires and everything that's been answered. So you already have that, and then you can extend it based on what you're doing with that company. I may send you, hey, additional 15 questions because I need to know your sub processes. How far deep does that go with the data that I'm sharing with you? So we are in the process of rolling out this. We don't have a mature program. Of course, I'm sure a lot of people have the Excel spreadsheets that are listed with all the vendors rated low, medium, high, who's the contacts. But in the US or the SEC regulations that are coming, it's going to be important to know how far does your data extend to other vendors. So I'm personally looking forward to having that, because since I had started with Cumulus years and years ago, that was the first thing on my list. Is I wanted to get my hands wrapped around who has our data, who we're dependent on, and then bringing in a great point on those tabletops to say, okay, how would we work with this vendor if something were to happen, and get them involved so we know what those steps look like.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then also, I guess other, besides vendors, then it comes to be like law enforcement too. in New York. We're located in Soho, Lower Manhattan, and we happen to be right across the street from the FCC, from the federal building. But you know what? We've used that to our advantage to kind of build a rapport. You know, and we're in New York Police Precinct number 1, so we know the local police department for physical threats. You know, and we've gotten to know our local FBI agent, honestly, both in New York and in Newark, New Jersey, across the river, which we're licensed to, one of our stations. And we've got to know them. We've got to, you know, basically pick up a little bit of a rapport. Also through our, you know, we have a physical director of physical security for the plant, and he's been very instrumental with that too. It's good to, you know, to drill these tabletops and then to expand that to include outside people. We have a question here for security, with an emphasis on vendor security assessment. What evaluation criteria and continuous monitoring processes should be implemented to ensure that third-party partnerships don't compromise the overall security posture of radio operations? I think we kind of spoke a bit about that. Anybody want to just flesh that out to speak more?
I mean, I'll just add a little bit more to that. I mean, it still goes back to the basics. You're talking about the evaluation criteria, continuous monitoring, the impact, the radio. It's what the vendor's being used for. So you have to set your expectations on that vendor of low, medium, high, you know, to your operations. What data, of course, like I said, what systems are being used, you know, do you have a backup, things like that. So your evaluation is what level are you going to grade this vendor on, you know, data, what does their security posture look like? Are they relaxed? Do they have, you know, assessments, audits, and things like that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to you to define what's important to your business to stay up and running and to flag that as a continuous monitor. So if somebody hits that critical point, and I'm going to pick on RCS, if I rely 100% on them, I'm going to ping them a little bit more often yearly, because I need to know, you know, like his release, his roadmaps. You know, my questionnaire and evaluation to him is going to be, what does his development look like? I don't want a SolarWinds attack. You know, how is code pushed out? You know, is it separate groups? All that stuff. So it goes back knowing your business, knowing who your vendors are, and how your relationship with them. And it's an open door communication. I mean, they realize that the platform has shifted to where, you know, everybody's in a sense responsible for these incidents. So, you know, you can help them improve their posture by, you know, offering up certain things. And I think the other part of that, you're talking about operation or on air AV or McAfee. Once again, it's about knowing what impacts. I know with us, audio, like Windows Update stuff, audio drivers and things like that break. I also have seen that you have a NIC card that is old, and all of a sudden there's an update that happens, and all of a sudden it broke it. So we had to roll back. So always have that test platform to be able, if you can. I know it's hard. I know the media industry hasn't been a fan of updates, because if it updates, it breaks the on-air stuff. But at the same time, I do believe that you got to run something parallel to be able to test those updates. I know it's hard. I know it's expense, but that's going to be the only way. You can't be scared to update, because what's going to happen is you're going to have that 0 day that comes out, and then there's a fix to something, and you have all these old Windows 8 machines sitting out there, or 7 or whatever, that needs an update, and then it breaks everything, and then you're exercising your IR and disaster recovery plan at that point.
Sure. Yeah, you know,
but I hope that makes sense to the guy that asked the question. But we have different policies for studios as we do for end users as well.
I was going to mention that too. We have operational units through Active Directory. So we can push out updates specifically to different OUs, whether you're just a business user or your studios or your broadcast. That happens at a completely different time, or it gets patched separately. And like I said before, we're a pretty small shop, but even we have like a dev environment where everything's kind of running in parallel, and we can just, even the Patch Tuesday patches, Tuesday comes out, we put it in the dev testing, for broadcast for business users, and let it sit for 3-4 days, and then if it's green lit Friday night, it goes out. And then you're right, from a server point of view, like on-air servers and things like that happens on a whole nother thing, basically on an overnight. And when and because we want to sleep too, so we farm that kind of stuff out to a service provider, and then we basically check it the next day.
So look, as long as you both say, as long as we are in an on-premise world, we have to update. We have to roll out new software. We have to rely on the third-party software that's protecting our machine to be updated. And yes, it has to be tested. We have, particularly for the on-air, if you have levels of critical machines to the machine that can be turned off and it won't hurt anybody, you have to make sure that everything can run properly when the update occurs. And it's no mystery that we're a big proponent of the cloud at RCS, but the on-prem world, every time you have an update for the software, for us, the RCS software or any other software, invariably the engineer is looking at you with an eyebrow up, saying, "Is this okay to install? Is this really something? Because I'm not going to do that every day." So rolling out software is exponentially complicated and risky with the number of machines that you have, with the number of stations that you have, with the number of things that you have to take care of if something goes wrong. We have customers who, in some countries, they decide to it's public service in one country. They decide to update only once a year their machine, and we said, once a year. Do you know how long you have to live with a bug if you do only once a year? And say, yeah, but we don't want to take the risk. And they install the new version on a completely separate system. They watch over it for months, and then they put in the budget to roll out, where they have to have extra workforce to roll out their system. This is the price to pay for on-prem software. Cloud gets you out of that. In the cloud, everybody in your organization is using the same version, the latest and greatest version. They log in the morning, and what they see on their screen is the latest and greatest version. So I know it's something that seems futuristic for other people, but in a cloud environment, not only do you have a need for fewer technical skills, if I might say, but most importantly, it's the end of the rollout of on-prem updates across your organization, which are the number one nightmare of any IT CTO, CIO, chief engineer in an organization. When the vendor says, "Hey, we got to update," and the users are saying, "Oh, I've been waiting for that update forever. You can't keep it away from me." So what they did in there is for me. So you're caught between a rock and a hard place. So it's really the price to pay for on-prem, unfortunately, and we have to live with it.
And we're getting used to that world of cloud now, right? With things like Office 365 and things like that. It's a two-edged sword, though. I'll wake up one morning, I'll put my I'll log into my email, and now things have changed, right? It's all right. So I can figure that out as a business user. But if I'm a DJ, I want to be careful with those kind of things. I want to make sure I know, when my next post is and where, and I, like you said, the songs and commercials, you got to keep them playing. So don't, So, but I think we're all kind of getting used to that world. And you're right, from a security perspective, I think, that's the way we got to do it. For broadcasters, we're still locked into some, some bare metal equipment. Look at the emergency alert system and things like that. It's in and out. It's right in the middle of a virtual environment, but it's still locked down to, frankly, 1990s technology. And these things have to change. For many reasons. But I think we're getting there. Well, listen, we're coming up to time. We've got about 5 minutes left. I'd like to leave the audience with just basically a little bit of wrap up with any particular thoughts that come to each of your mind. Take 60 seconds, and if you want to leave the audience with any particular point, I'd love to hear what you might have to leave with them. Emilian, do you want to go first?
I will say that it's easy in a 1 hour panel discussion for speakers to say do this, do that, do the other thing, and obviously each thing that we've mentioned is lots and lots and lots of work. Like Philippe just said, right? We can say test the software. Well, it's a lot of work. Brian and I said know your stuff. It's a lot of work. Do a tabletop. It's a lot of work. And all I would say that any of those things can deliver a fair bit of their value with a very quick job. So if you don't yet have a full understanding of the business, you don't have to go through a 6-month business impact analysis. Get the executive team together for 45 minutes with a whiteboard and try to map out the business. If you don't have a list of your most important vendors, you don't have to go survey 100% of the vendors. Get one representative per business unit together for 2 hours and whiteboard the top vendors they can think of. And if you can't go for the full fancy, tabletop with the vendor and the outside PR and all this stuff, again, just get the executive team together for 3 hours. Start with the question of, what keeps you up at night? Pick a scenario and talk through it for an hour or two. Any of these things, just doing a quick and dirty version will deliver a lot of value if you haven't started yet. And so I would say, we can give all the big advice, but sometimes a quick job is a great place to start. And thank you for having me here today. It was a terrific discussion. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Emilian. Thank you. And just a quick comment on that, just before the holiday this year, a bunch of, senior leaders and things were going out of, for my company. And frankly, there was a lot of sickness going around. And so we got together before the holiday just for even a half an hour. And we said, okay, let's just review. Here's the data breach hotline to the lawyers. Here's law enforcement. Here's our managed service security provider hotline. Let's just get this. And we used paper because, we just, each person got a piece of paper to take home with them for the holidays. And because we were all going to be dispersed, and disrupted for about a week or two. And we did just that, just in, in a half an hour. So it's a great point.
Especially since the hackers love hacking on the holidays. So very good idea.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. All right. Brian, would you like to give a couple words to wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. Ditto on everything Emilian just said. The one thing I would probably throw out there, if, I know everybody has different tool sets, but, and I'm just dropping this name because I know it's free, but like Security Scorecard, just kind of gives you a little snapshot of your public view. That may be a place to start with, just to kind of see what the bad guys can see from you. There's other ones out there as well, but just kind of start there. Kind of look at your posture from that end, and then the inside, the systems, the environments, the software, the vendors. It's just baby step them brick by brick, and then you'll start to feel confident with what you have in place going forward.
Great. And, a quick point on that too. Something like Security Scorecard, you hit the nail on the head when you say how the outside world sees you. That's vastly important and could save you a lot of money from a cyber liability perspective if you're going for cyber liability insurance.
Yeah. And I have one thing they do. I have one more point I made that I made a note on. And if you have firewalls, a lot of times people have implemented these and then they walked away from them. Go back and look through these policies. You'll be amazed at what you find. Because besides phishing, you have misconfigurations. Both of those actually take the human element to allow a bad guy in. But review your policies, make sure you have the right ports open. Don't just open everything because it fixed the problem. Just make sure it's there and it exists for a business reason. So,
Well done.
And thank you for having me as well.
Absolutely. Philippe, you get the last word here, sir.
There you go. So it's, just choose. If you work with a vendor who has some experience, you will be better off. So choose your vendors, particularly for critical on our operation, because they have a lot of experience and they've been around and they've seen a lot of situations and they can talk to you. All your vendors, I'm talking for RCS, but any vendors that you choose, they'll listen to you and see if they've experienced the same type of a question that you have and give you the right answers. And it's really a question of trust. You have to have somebody work with people that have experience. That's what I'm going to say. You lower your risk if you take a bigger organization. That's for sure. And thank you for that fantastic panel. Thank you, Brian, Emilian, and Steve for moderating that. That was very interesting.
Absolutely. Emilian, Brian, Philip, wonderful panel. Wonderful. I hope the audience got a lot out of this. Thank you all very much. I'm going to try to leave here on time, and which we're at right now. So like a good radio professional, we're going to hit our post. Thank you, everybody. Okay, have a good one.